criminal charges. Well, earlier today, Justice Minister Michael Masuta announced that President Zuma has released the regulations for the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture. Joining us now on the line is a Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, Sanusha Naidu. Thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the program. It's been quite a week and a lot of things can happen over the weekend, and there's a lot of promise that they will. Do you think that we'll see a very different ANC from next week?
Good evening, Peter. It's a difficult one to predict because I think that in the last several days we've seen a whole lot of limbo taking place. We had the State of the Nation address postponed, which was a very historic thing in our country. And more importantly, I think we were waiting with bated breath for some decision to be made, possibly on Wednesday or even on Thursday, with the NEC meeting having been cancelled as well. So I think what we see happening tomorrow, again, doesn't give one a sense of whether there's going to be some kind of clarity on the situation regarding President Zuma and, of course, the situation regarding him remaining as president of the state. And I think what has been very, very poorly communicated to the rest of South Africans was where is the process and where is the state of the engagement and the discussion is. I think the press briefing or the statement that Deputy President Ramaphosa released and said that we are dealing with the matter and we'll have an answer in the next several days doesn't give us a sense of confidence. But I think at this point in time, we're actually a country that's in limbo. We're almost doing what the U.S. is doing in a sense where we are basically in shutdown. Nothing is getting done. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And we have a State of the Nation address that needs to be undertaken. But we have a budget speech that's going to be happening in about 14 days' time. And we still don't, less than that. And we still don't know where things are.
So what does this do for brand ANC? They came out of the elective conference. People said that all hell was going to break loose going into it, but they came through it. They had a peaceful elective conference, and they started saying the right things straight from the outset. Unity, we're going to get rid of corruption. And it seemed as if brand ANC and brand, by extension, brand South Africa was on the rise, and we saw the markets lift. What is this period of time doing to that brand equity that built?
I mean, it's a very important thing that you raised because branding and equity is something that gives you the confidence both globally and in terms of the markets. And I think we saw that when President Ramaphosa of the party, that is, went to Davos and he essentially sold South Africa on this branding. Now, if you wait too long, the branding slips. And the slippage that you get out of branding means, again, that the uncertainty sets back into place. And so there's no clarity. There's no sense of whether there's a decisiveness that's taking place. And I suspect that this lack of clarity and this indecision that we're seeing going back and forth in terms of negotiating, etc., has to do with the sensitivity of the issues that are being discussed, but also has to do with the fact that people are talking about whether or not Cyril Ramaphosa has the ability to push the kind of trajectory he wants. At the end of the day, I think there's two things here for us to bear in mind. It's about not just the brand of the party that we have to worry about, it's about the brand of South Africa. But at the same time, I think both represent very important implications for the country. So if you're seeing a slippage in terms of the brand of the party, I think it inevitably is going to affect the country and vice versa. So the question is really, what do you do? How do you make sure that you retain the momentum that you saw when you actually went to Davos and then, of course, in the momentum with the markets that we see now?
All right, so right now we're dealing with one person, and that's the president of the country. But I would imagine that if they get over this hurdle, that Cyril Ramaphosa is going to be forced almost immediately to do a sweeping of the broom, as it were, and anyone that's mentioned in the Gupta emails probably has to go.
Well, I think he has a mammoth task in front of him, not just about sweeping of the broom. I think it's just about dealing with policy and policy certainty in the broad spectrum of the political landscape in the country. So he has to restore confidence, which I think not about 2 or 3 days ago, we saw that confidence level increase. We see the market and the rand doing well, but that's all very, very you can't assume it to be static. It's very fluid at this point. But more importantly, I think they also want to see, and not just international community. I think South Africans themselves want to see how are we going to deal with corruption. So it's not just sweeping a broom if there's a name of Gupta aligned or email or whatever. But I think it's the whole context of the corruption in terms of how it has embedded itself within the political landscape. And I think at the end of the day, the big question for Cyril Ramaphosa is what kind of action is he going to take against people who have been indicted on charges of corruption, who have been part of the corruption themselves. And that's going to be a tricky one for him, because I think with the inquiry on state capture being given its terms of reference, and where people now can be subpoenaed by the Deputy Chief Justice in terms of the terms of reference, it's going to be quite an interesting space. So it's not just about the international community as well. I think it's also about reinstilling the confidence of South Africans in the country and in the polity of the country.
All right, so that's where we're going to leave it. Sanusha Naidu, thank you very much indeed for your time. So an interesting space. I dare say it's going to be an interesting and maybe a very long weekend. We'll be back after this.